Hi, this is Daniel with End Time Country Living, and on this video it's time to start some onion seeds. That's coming up. So the first thing I need to do is to go out to my shed and get all my little pots and trays all ready to go. So let's do that. So I like to keep all my pots in my shed so that it keeps the sun off of them and keeps them from deteriorating and keeps the weather off of them. So these are the 6 packs that I like to use. They work well for my onions. I'm getting a whole bunch here. I'm going to do about 500 onions this year of plants, so I need about 90 or so of these trays. I'm getting those together, and I need about 7 of my to 8 of my trays. I haven't got all the numbers calculated out perfectly. This is just kind of estimating for right now, and then I'll do some math in the house and get it all figured out here. So I'm going to do all my potting in the house here where it's nice and warm and comfortable, and so I got to get everything in ready to go. And the other thing I need to get is all my seed starting trays, my 10 by 20 flats. So getting all those together here. And the next thing I got to get is all my seed starting mix, my soil mixture together. And so I have some other videos on that of how to screen out old compost and piles of organic matter to get fines for seed starting mix. So I'm going to use that and mix in about half of peat moss to kind of extend it, since I'm always kind of short on really good compost for seed starting. And since I'm probably going to actually do more tomatoes this year, and they're gallon pots, so they take up a lot. So I'm trying to extend it on fairly economically with peat moss. So we're going to see how that works this year, and so I'll get that together here. So I'm going to need quite a few bags for all the different 6 packs that I'm going to use for the onion start. So I'll show you how I do that. So back in the fall, when they were on sale, I got 2 of these 2.2 cubic feet bales here. So I have 4.4 cubic feet of peat moss. I'm hoping that will last me for all my seed starting. I can always go get another bale, I suppose. Hopefully I can find some on sale. So we'll use this and mix it up in the wheelbarrow here. I need to get my compost here. Okay, so we're going to use the wheelbarrow here to mix it all up. So one of the tools that I'm going to use is my super shovel trowel. Let me get that here. So this is my tool of choice for moving large quantities of compost by hand around. Because it's an old shovel handle, or not handle, but shovel head, and works very well for scooping things up that are not terribly heavy. I wouldn't want to do rocks like this, but works fairly well for lightweight things I can use with one hand, and holds quite a lot. And it was free. Okay. Start dumping some of the compost in here. Alright, let me see here. Okay, so we got about this much here, and then we'll put in some peat moss about the same amount. It's highly compressed, so it's going to take some beating and manipulating here to get this broken up here. That's probably about the same as what I put in there of the compost. Maybe I'll put a little bit more compost in there. Make a big batch up here all at once. And then we can save it for, I'll need it for other stuff too. I'm sure I won't use all this for just the onions, but it's better to do it all at once here rather than having to do a little bit at a time. So one of the things that I just thought about here as I was mixing this up was that the peat moss was compressed and my compost is not. So that means if I try to put equal parts of the compressed with the compost, it isn't going to be 50-50 mix. It's going to be probably, I don't know, 65 to 35 or something like that ratio. And so I'm going to need some more. I need to probably put in all the compost in this bigger bag to kind of get a more of a 50-50 mix to get enough compost in there. So I'm going to add the rest of the compost in here and get it all mixed up. Also, it's 40 degrees out here, and the compost and the peat moss are about 40 degrees, so mixing it up with bare hands got a little cold. Fingers are getting a little frigid, so got my favorite. Actually, these aren't vinyl enemy. I'll have to look up what these are. They're new material. These are the Atlas. Shawa is the other brand that it comes by. These are the 720Rs. Anyway, these are great sturdy gloves for working with things that are muddy, wet, and cold, and it keeps your hands dry and a little bit insulated. So something to use to mix this stuff up. Beep, 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 beep. Beep, 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 beep. Oh, sorry. Hi, I guess I got it done here. Just a little playing while I got done here. Makes a great sandbox here. So one of the other things that's recommended to put in a seed starting mix like this is rock dust. I've heard a lot of good things about that. I haven't really experimented it too much with myself, but I'm going to throw some in there in just a small quantity to get some extra minerals for the starting plants to be able to utilize. Oh, this is a small bag, it's heavy. Alright, so now we need to calculate how many trays we need to fill up here to get our 500 plants that we're going to be setting out here. So we need, probably should have a little bit more than 500 cells, because you're always going to have one or two that are missing. I'd rather have a few, 10 or 15 more plants. Especially if they're weak, they're going to get some weak ones, so we always need a little extra. So maybe about 20 or so extra we can kind of judge. So need to figure. So we got 72 cells, in a tray. So I got my TI-89 graphing calculator, a little overkill for the job, but this is back from my college days, doing calculus and physics with calculus and all the other ones there. So anyway, so let's figure it out here. So we want to do, so it's 520. So we punch in 520 here. And then we want to do, divide that by 72. Okay. So that gives me 7.22 trays. Okay. So that means I need basically 8 trays with 1/2 full. So we may, oh hey, I have some smaller trays that we can use for that. So I need to figure out how many extra little 6-pack pots we need beyond the 7 trays that we need. So what we need to do then, if we want 520, so then what we need to do is do 7 times, and we want to do 72. That tells us we're going to get 504 cells out of the 7 trays. Now that's pretty close. That may be enough, but I'd rather have a few extra. So let's do a few extra here. So that means we have, oh, let's see here, not 15, but 16. 16 extra, what, cells? So 16 extra cells. Now each cell has 6. So 12 would be 2, and then 13, 14, 15, 16, that would be another 4. So let's do 3 extra 6-packs there, pots. So let's try that beyond our 7 flats. Okay, got the math? All right, let's go. All right, so got my trays, well, 2 done here for right now, just for the demonstration purposes here. So let's talk a little bit more about varieties, and this is really going to first depend on where you live, because if you live in the north or you live in the south, it's going to depend on which varieties you need. So you want to kind of ask around, find out in the seed catalogs what works. So what you can do on your own is to look for short day or long day onions. Ones that like during the growing season, whether or not they like a short day or a long day. Down south, the more south you get, the shorter your days are going to be. So I believe it's something like 10 to 12 day lengths down as a southern part of the US at least. And then up north we're going to be 12 to 14 day lengths during the growing season. So the other characteristic you want to think about is storage ability, whether or not you want this to just to be something that tastes really good and you use it up fairly quickly within a month or so, or you want these to be able to store. Now on a homestead where we're trying to produce a lot of our food, we want to be able to pick varieties that that store really well, because you grow a whole bunch of onions and then you lose 50% of those because you can't use them up in time and they go bad. And you can find ways to freeze, dehydrate, but that's a lot of work for something that can be stored fresh. It's one of the nice things to have, things that can be stored fresh, like butternut squash, winter squash, other varieties, ones that you can actually store fresh. You don't have to spend the time to can, dry, dehydrate, whatever your favorite preservation method is. If you don't have to do that, that's a big advantage. So that's another characteristic to think about. And so the variety that I'm going to do this year, let's talk about, so what did I do last year? Last year I did sweet Spanish onions. There's Trade Wind Fruits, I think, has a really good deal on the sweet Spanish onion variety seeds. You can get a whole bunch for very, very little. They produce great onions, but they don't particularly store real well. And that's what I did pretty much all of. I think I had maybe one onion that was stuck in there accidentally. That was like a white onion that just got stuck in the mixture there. But what I planted intentionally was the sweet Spanish. Wouldn't recommend. They're a great onion for using up right away, but not for storage. So we're here in February, and pretty much at least half of the onions. Well, okay, let's put it that way. Most of the onions, I would say 80% of them, are starting to decay on the inside and sprouting. So they're starting to rot from the inside out, and that's not good. And they don't, other varieties don't do that necessarily. Many of other varieties out there will last, 7 to 12 months or so. Looking for ones that are obviously on the higher end of storage as long as possible. Okay, so the variety that I've chosen for this year is called Yellow of Parma. The best deal for these seeds I was able to find was at Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, rareseeds.com. And so this is the packet I was able to get, 5,000 seeds, 17.1 grams worth of bulk seeds. So this was a good deal. I think they, won at $8 for 5,000 seeds, which was better than any other online retailers I was able to find. So some of the characteristics of this particular onion are that it is a 110-day approximately growing time that it needs. It's an Italian variety that was introduced in 1896, and it has a characteristic of when you first harvest it, it's fairly sweet and mild onion, and then as it goes in storage, it becomes more pungent. So it's supposed to store for about 12 months is the storage time. So that's what I'm looking for. Onions that store as long as possible. A year would be great. So that fits that criteria. As far as the time to plant, I want to talk a little bit about that. So onions need to be at about 60 degrees in order to germinate. And so that means if you're going to start them from seed out in the garden, it's going to be way too late. By the time you're not going to be able to get mature onions if you start them out in the soil. Taking 110 days from the point of usually transplant of little sets that are 6 inches tall, usually what they're gauging off of that growing time, because almost everyone will start them as little sets. They set out. So then when do you start them? Well, you have to kind of figure out that based off of your last fall frost date. And you can find this on the internet if you do some searches. Last LFF, last fall frost date average for your area, your zip code, and you can find a date. Mine particular one in this area is April 24, so I use that as a gauge for when I start my seeds. So for onions, you need to transplant them out 4 to 6 weeks. So I usually go by the bigger number just so it gives me a little more leeway. So 6 weeks before you set them out, or let's see here. So you set them out in the garden about 6 weeks before the last fall frost. So 6 weeks before April 24 gives me March 13. Okay, so that's the date that I mark on my calendar for setting out my onions in the garden. Okay, so then in order to get them to that point, I need to start them another 6 weeks before that. So they have 6 weeks to grow before I set them out. So that means I need to start them, that would be today, which would be February 6th. So that's 6 weeks from today. I'll set them out, which would be March 13. So you kind of have to do a little bit of math, look on the calendar, and calculate all this stuff out. So anyway, this is why I'm doing it today. And you know, if you may want to do them a little bit sooner, you know, middle of January if you have warmer climate. So you can decide when you want to do it, but that's for us here in Oregon, that's what works well. Okay, so some other varieties. You don't have to choose yellow or Parma if you don't want. There's some other varieties that I would been researching that I would recommend to you to look up. So Clear Dawn, that would be another one here. That one's probably my least favorite choice. So that will store for about 7 months. It's a 110-day onion. It gets to be about medium sized, which is usually 3 to 4 inches. That's a long day variety. And then another one, which is another one that I would recommend, is Copra, C-O-P-R-A, or Copra, however you want to pronounce it. It is a hybrid. These other ones that I'm recommending are all open pollinated. So the Copra, or Copra, however you want to say it, is 104 days, and it gets to be about 3 to 4 inches in diameter. It'll store for about 10 to 12 months, so that's good. And it's let's see here, either it's I wrote down 104 and then I wrote down 110, so it's one of those, somewhere in between 104 to 110 days of growing time. Another one that I would recommend, looks a little better, is called Dakota Tears, and that's about a 3-inch average size. Most of these, you know, it depends on the growing conditions, how big they get, but that's, you know, general size. If you all have, everything else is equal, you know, compared to other ones, what size they usually will get. That one's about a 112-day growing period. That was brought out by a David Podell, or Podall. He's the one that was the plant breeder for it, and it will store for 10 to 12 months, which is great. So that is an open pollinated variety, so I would recommend that one. Another one that's, if you're looking for a red onion, these other ones are more of a yellow onions. And another one's called Ruby. You can look that one up. I believe that is, Adaptive Seeds has that one available. And also Blanco Duro, B-L-A-N-C-O, and then Duro, D-U-R-O. So you can look up, couldn't find a whole lot of information on the storage length of those and some of the details, but those would be some other names of some good storage onions, long-term storage ones that you may want to look up and do a little more research on. So those gives you some names. Probably the best one that I found is the Dakota Tears. That would probably be my second choice after the Yellow Parma. So anyway, it gives you some idea of, you know, something that gives you a starting place. And if you live in the south or something, or down where the days are a little shorter, then you're going to look for short season or short day length onions. So one of the other things that you can look at is the growing period. That really determines the storage length as well. So if you can find a variety that you can't figure out or get a rating on how many months it stores, you can look at the day length. So if it's, you know, around 110, maybe 115, sorry, not the day length, but the growing period. So if it takes 115 days to maturity, then that's an indicator that it will store a long time. It's kind of like apples are the same way, where you get an early maturing apple, it won't store very well. But if you have a late maturing apple, it'll generally store quite a bit longer. There's always variation in varieties, so it isn't a guarantee, but it can be an indicator. If it says, stores well, well, what does that mean? So sometimes you don't always know. So look around. So what I had to do is look at about 4 different websites that sold the same variety, and look in their description and say, oh, there it is right there. Stores for 10 months, 10 to 12 months or something like that, or 7 months. Some of them say and some of them don't. So just do a little bit of research, and that's how I was able to determine the information I needed. Okay, so let's do some seeding here. So one of the notes here is that the seeds will take 8 to 12 days to germinate. Okay, so some tips on getting them to germinate quickly is to provide bottom heat, some kind of heating source, like a heating pad. There's seed starting heaters, mats that you can buy. They're not cheap, but you can get one if you like. I'm going to be doing about, seven trays, so buying a heating mat for each one is definitely not economical. That would be ridiculous, so I'm not going to be doing that, but that is one way. If you are just doing one tray and you want them to germinate quickly, you can do some heat. So what germinates faster is if the soil temperature is higher than the air temperature. So if you keep your house at 70 degrees or so, you want that heating mat to be 75, something like that, 78, something like that. If you can keep the soil temperature up higher than the air temperature, that will increase germination rate. Moisture content, if you have a moist environment you can germinate these in, great. There's germination chambers that people use to germinate them more quickly. You can look into that if you like. So anyway, I just keep them near my wood stove on a rack, so they keep nice and warm. So the minimal germination temperature for the soil is going to be 60 degrees. Okay, so don't put these out in a greenhouse where it's going to get cold during the night or something like that. Keep them at 60 or above as much as you can to get these to germinate quickly. They'll go up to about 80 degrees soil temperature, but don't go over that. So if you're using a heating mat, don't say, 85, hey, they should really jump up. Well, they won't. So at least they generally shouldn't. You may find a variety that handles the heat a little bit better, but generally 60 to 80 is the temperature range of the soil that you want to keep. So that means you want to stick a soil thermometer in there and kind of check it to make sure you're up. So I believe it's about, I want to say 5 degrees lower than the air temperature. Generally, if once they come up, have them in the house and they get up to temperature, usually the soil is about 5 degrees below the air temperature. So that's something to keep in mind. So you're going to have to keep your house at about 70 or 65 minimum in order to get these to germinate. So that shouldn't be a problem, but just a note, just to give you a little extra information. So anyway, let's take a look here and see what our seeds look like. So, bunch of black granular stuff here. There's your seeds. That's what they about look like. So my rule of thumb that seems to work out pretty well is to do about 3 times the amount of seeds that you need for planting here. So 5,000 is definitely more than I need, but it's always good to have a little extra. So 3 to 4 seeds, somewhere in that variety. Usually I do about 3 per cell, and then you're always going to have a few cells that, maybe even 10%, that decide they're not going to germinate anything. Nothing's going to come up. It's unusual, but, actually, I wouldn't say it's unusual. That's about what I've got in the past. Whether or not that continues, depending on what soil mixes and who knows what factors. If, some little creature in that particular one decided to have lunch and eat all my seeds, I don't know. It's hard to know what's happened in the past for sure, but that's generally what happens. There's a few cells that get nothing in them. So, and also there's always going to be weak ones too. So if you did just one cell, one seed per cell, and said, well, I have, 10 more than I need, but you're always going to have the weak ones. You're going to have, 3 come up, and one's going to be nice and big and lush, and the other 2 are going to be scrawny, or you're going to have 2 nice ones and 1 scrawny one. So you want to kind of high grade, or pick out, thin the weak ones out, so that you have a good strong plants. That's another good criteria procedure to do. So what you want to do is kind of like pack these down just a little bit. Let's see here. So, well, I'm going to be able to poke some holes in here. Yeah, I would say just a finger press in the middle. You want to be able to kind of keep them towards the middle. You don't want to have your plant off to the side of one of the cells. And everybody's a little bit different on how they want to seed these things. You can use the packet here. So usually I fold the sticky part back here. There we go. So I fold the sticky flap that would come around here. It's got a sticky flap or a Ziploc bag. Ziploc bags are a little bit hard to seed from. Usually I recommend dumping them into a paper one if you're going to try to seed it. So you can crease this here, create a crease along one side here, and then you can use your index finger to tap. Try to get about three to four seeds in there. Get them coming in a little line here down the crease. 1, 2, 3. There's 3 seeds there. So there's 4 there. Just kind of go along like that. So they're about how quickly you can do it that way, or you can do the handful. Grabs. So you can grab some in your hand and drop them in there. Grab, or you can also kind of rub your fingers. So you kind of pull one back like this. That lets the seeds drop. So this way you can kind of grab some real quick, drop. Grab, drop, and you can kind of like guess how much is in there. I think I find this actually is a little easier, a little more control. The tapping can be kind of repetitive and rather boring. This way you can, a little bit of change, you can kind of like just kind of get them in there real quick. So just punch some more holes in here. So you can find out which way works best for you. I'm not going to say one way's the most fabulous or my way is the most fabulous type thing. I'm sure other people have some great ideas too, so just find some different ways, practice what works well to get those seeds in there quick. But anyway, something like that, where sometimes I get 5 seeds in there. It's, you don't have to be super critical on it, as long as you have enough seeds in your packet to allow you to put in 5 if need be, or 3, or I try to get at least 3 in there. So anyway, all right, so then it's just a matter of getting them covered up. Usually I just kind of squish, use my fingers to close them up here, and just taking 2 hands and using 3 fingers just as kind of a three corners, and kind of like squish the soil from the edges in, because that's basically just a reverse of what I was doing before. So just kind of scooping them in like that, and then you can get 2 hands going just to kind of close it up over the seeds. They don't need to be very deep at all, just so they're covered. I'm just going to do a quick press over the top, and then you're done. So just a quick squish, 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 and there I got 12 of them done, all like that. So that's just how you quick way to cover them up. You can figure out some people like to, sprinkle, get a handful and sprinkle more seed starting mix over the top. Some people like to use vermiculite over the top, so you can decide, but this is what works for me, simple, effective. Okay, so I got two of the flats done, so I'm going to show you how to get them bottom watered, how much to do, kind of what to look for, things like that. Okay, so putting this up here, this is kind of a little greenhouse rack here I use for my seed trays here. So I got 4 levels, 4 racks on here down. So I'm going to set these. This is right here by our wood stove, so that will keep them nice and warm here. Okay, so first watering here goes. Get my watering can here. So this is my latest find for a watering can. So this is a Bloom one that I got, I can't remember where I got it now. Something like one of the farm supply stores. That seems to be the nicest one I've been able to find. I really do like plastic just because it doesn't deteriorate. I've gone through a couple metal ones and they tend to rust out on me within a couple years. So trying out the plastic, see how long it will last. So anyway, bottom watering goes like this. Okay, so just take one of these trays out is the easiest way. And what I'm going to do is put about 1 inch of water in the bottom in the tray here. So just pour some in like so, and using fairly warm water. Even hot can work pretty good as long as there isn't roots down in that zone when you're actually doing the watering. So I just keep dumping the water in here, quite a bit, maybe 2 quarts or something like that, maybe 1.5 quarts. So once we get about to the 1 inch mark, it's usually sufficient. Within, I'd say a couple hours, I would check it again because it may have absorbed all that water and you probably need to add more. But as long as you can see moisture on the top here of the soil, then that means they're watered enough. So once that starts to dry out, which you don't want it to let it to do here, so as soon as it gets, I would say for when the seeds are germinating, you'll continue to do this method for when they actually have sprouted, but for when they're germinating, you want to keep the top soil level moist all the time. And so you want to kind of check it and say, there's pretty much dry in there. Add a little bit more, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch of water, just something to keep some moisture going in there. So it's going to wick it up is what's going to happen here. There's a little crack here, slit in the bottom of each one of these cells here. That's the water's going to be going up to about here, about an inch up. Actually, these are going to be a little bit floating, so they're not going to be completely down. So about inch up on here is kind of where you want the water level to be, regardless. Initially, when you add water, don't do too much. You don't want to saturate them, have a swamp in there for the seeds to be in. Okay, so now I got this all filled up. We'll just move on to the next one and let this sit here, and we'll check in half hour to see kind of what the progress is, but you may not see a whole lot of absorption for maybe a couple hours. And I haven't tried this seed mix before, so I'm hoping I don't have to top water these things in order to get it to start wicking up. We'll have to see here and just kind of monitor it. You have to do a little bit of top watering, fine mist. Even a squirt bottle can work to kind of squirt over the surface of these to get them damp. So just have to see how this mix works. The other soil mixes I've used in the past have worked really well, so I'm going to determine how well this stuff will wet. It should wet, and one level should wet the next and should keep going up there, but you may have to start with a little bit more water than this. Let's see here. So I quickly want to talk to you guys about faith and seeds. in Matthew 17, Jesus' disciples are unable to drive out a demon from a young boy. The disciples come to Jesus privately and say, "Why could we not cast it out?" So Jesus said to them, "Because of your unbelief," which unbelief is the opposite of faith. "For assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed." Now, Jesus also told a parable about a mustard seed, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds. But when it grows, it is greater than the herbs, and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and nest in its branches." Now, Jesus obviously knew that the mustard seed doesn't actually become a tree. But the point that Jesus was trying to make is that we start out small and grow. Our faith starts out small and grows. So as we exercise faith or trust in God, that faith grows. Faith that is powerful is the type that grows. And faith that grows is faith that is exercised with works. James said that faith without works is dead faith. The same is with seeds. They start out small, they appear to be dead, but if you put faith in that small seed and plant it and water it, it will grow and produce something delicious to eat, like this onion. The Bible says in Hebrews 11:6 that without faith it is impossible to please God. Yet faith is a powerful gift from God that grows. Ephesians 2:8 and 9. We are created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So I encourage you to learn a lesson from this small seed and exercise faith with care, and it will grow and produce something wonderful. All right, God bless. Okay, that's all I have for you today on starting your onions. And so if you haven't done it yet, get started on that. And if you live in even a warmer climate, you probably should have done it before, but anyway, I'm just doing mine here now, so I just wanted to let you know this is a good time to be doing that if you live in Oregon, Washington, somewhere in that vicinity, or across the U.S. in the northern climate. And if you live in Michigan or someplace like that, you probably want to do it maybe a couple weeks from now or something like that. So anyway, I hope you found this video useful, and be sure to like my Facebook page and subscribe if you're on my YouTube channel. See you guys on the next video, and God bless.